Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a specific kind of person.
A very specific kind.
I guarantee you know one. You might work for one. You might even be one, though, and I think this is key. If you are, you probably won't admit to the vulnerabilities we're about to discuss.
Oh, absolutely not. Admitting vulnerability is not part of the operating system here.
We're talking about what the sources call the Paradox of Competence.
It is a striking paradox. We look at these high performers, the people running companies, designing complex infrastructure, the ones who seem to have an inexhaustible battery for logic and strategy, and we just assume they're bulletproof.
Right. You assume that because they can organize the external world so effectively, their internal world must be just as neat and tidy.
Perfectly organized. But it's almost never the case. The research suggests the exact opposite is true. Their internal architecture is uniquely fragile in a very specific way.
And the sack of research you brought in today, it's fascinating. We're looking at clinical analyses of strategic collapse, reports on functional erosion, and protocols for performance deconditioning.
Yes.
These are not terms you usually hear associated with a mental health crisis. It really sounds more like engineering failure analysis.
And that is exactly how we need to look at it, because that's how they experience it. The subject today is what we're calling the xNTJ spectrum.
Okay, let's define that for a second.
We're talking about the ENTJ, often called the commander, and the INTJ, the architect. These are two of the most strategic, efficiency-driven types in the Myers-Briggs system.
And the sources are very clear on this point. Their failure mode isn't a typical emotional breakdown. They don't just, get sad.
No, not at all. It's a systemic, almost mechanical failure. It's a collapse of the very cognitive functions that make them who they are.
Functional erosion. That phrase from the research really stuck with me. It sounds like a machine stripping its gears.
It's a perfect description. It is remarkably similar to that. When an xNTJ collapses, it isn't usually triggered by a single big traumatic emotional event in the way we might expect. It's a slow grinding down. It's a breakdown of their cognitive architecture.
So the very engine that makes them so successful.
It's the same engine that, when it misfires, causes the entire system to crash. And because their identity is so completely wrapped up in being the person who fixes things, who solves the problems,
Right.
when the fixer breaks, the results are catastrophic. They don't have a backup identity to fall back on.
So our mission today is to pop the hood on this high-performance engine. We need to understand how the healthy xNTJ operates, why they are so prone to this specific kind of what the sources call learned helplessness.
Which is a terrifying state for them.
And then, and this is the part I found most counterintuitive in the reading How to Fix It, because the sources say that the typical advice, self-care and empathy, it might actually make things worse.
It often does. If you try to hug an ENTJ who is in the middle of a strategic collapse, you are likely to get your head bitten off.
Or at least get a lecture on the inefficiency of emotional displays.
Chuckles. Exactly. You'll be viewed as utterly incompetent and part of the problem. The recovery protocol here has to be about optimization, not consolation. It's about debugging a system, not comforting a person.
Okay, let's start with the machine when it's working. Let's look at the engine. We're grouping ENTJs and INTJs together here as the xNTJ spectrum. What is the shared operating system that drives them?
It all comes down to the interplay of their top two cognitive functions. You have extroverted thinking, which is called Te, and introverted intuition, or Ni.
Right.
And regardless of whether they are an E or an ISO, whether Te or Ni is in the number one slot, these two functions are the captains of the ship. They're what's driving everything.
Let's break those down, because I think people often misunderstand thinking and intuition in this context. Te, extroverted thinking. It isn't just being smart.
Right. No, not at all. That's a common misconception. Extroverted thinking is about external order. It's the get-it-done function. It looks at the environment, a business, a messy room, a project schedule, and it asks one simple question. Is this efficient? Does this work?
It's purely objective.
Completely. It's results-oriented. It wants to impose logic on chaos. It builds systems, frameworks, and schedules to make the world run better. It's the drive to organize and execute.
So that's the engine that drives the action. Then you have Ni, the introverted intuition. This is the more mysterious one. It's the crystal ball.
That's a good way to put it. Essentially, yes, Ni is a perception function. It's not about what is, it's about what will be. It works unconsciously, synthesizing massive amounts of abstract data to identify patterns and predict trajectories.
So it's not psychic.
No, but it can look like it. It's an incredibly powerful pattern recognition machine. It's always looking forward, generating a vision of the future, seeing the hidden connections between things that seem unrelated. It provides the roadmap.
And when you pair them up, the knee and the T, the sources describe this feedback loop as a laser beam sniper. I love that analogy.
It is the perfect analogy, isn't it? Think about how a sniper operates. They don't just run into a room and start shooting. That's not efficient. That's messy. That's a waste of resources.
No, it's about precision.
It's about maximum effect with minimum effort. The xNTJ uses knee, the intuition, to scan the entire battlefield. They predict the movement of the target, calculate the wind, the distance, and they see the future outcome in their mind's eye. That's the vision.
The roadmap.
Then, Tay steps in to execute the single, precise action required to achieve that outcome. It's not 100 small actions, it's one perfect one. Pull the trigger at the exact right moment.
So it's a combination of this big picture vision from knee and ruthless execution from Tay.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when this loop is working, it creates this powerful feedback loop of success. The Nye predicts a path. T breaks that path down into measurable step blocks, KPIs, milestones. Then they execute. They see the result, which validates the original vision, which in turn strengthens their confidence and their intuition.
It's a perpetual motion machine of competence.
That's what it feels like for them and for everyone watching them.
This brings up a really important point about their psychology, which you touched on earlier. For these types, being competent, it isn't just a nice to have. It's not about ego or vanity.
No, not in the way we usually think of it. It is a core psychological necessity. Their sense of self is built on it.
The text calls it a drive for agency.
Agency is the key word. For an xNTJ, identity is intrinsically linked to their ability to affect the outcome, to impose order. If they cannot look at a situation, analyze it, and impose their will upon it to improve it.
They feel useless.
It's deeper than that. They feel like they don't exist. Their self-worth is entirely conditional on their utility and their efficacy. If I am not effective, I am not valuable. If I am not valuable, I am nothing.
Which sounds incredibly heavy. I mean, if my self-worth was entirely dependent on my to-do list for the day, I'd be a mess.
But they do have other gears, right? The sources are clear they aren't just robots.
They aren't robots, despite what they might want you to believe sometimes. They have two lower functions that play a critical, though often hidden, role. In the third slot, the tertiary position is extroverted sensing, or say.
The fun function. Or maybe the release valve.
Release valve is a better term for it. In a healthy xNTJ, yes, say is about a physical immersion in the present moment. It's the grounding wire. When the NITED planning brain gets too hot running too many simulations, they need to engage say to cool down.
And what does that look like in practice? This is the CEO who runs marathons. The architect who is obsessed with cooking high-end meals or has a passion for fast cars. The strategist who goes hiking or takes up rock climbing. It allows them to get out of their head and into their body. It forces them into the here and now.
It stops the future planning machine.
For a little while, yes. It grounds them in physical reality, which is a necessary counterbalance to all the abstract thinking.
And then, buried deep in the basement of their personality is the fourth function, the inferior function, introverted feeling, or phi.
The tuning fork. This is often the most misunderstood part of the xNTJ. People think they don't have feelings because they lead with cold logic. That's not true at all.
So they do have them, they're just locked away.
They have very deep, very intense feelings. They just keep them extremely private. Phi provides the moral compass. It's the quiet voice that asks, does this goal matter? Is this right?
So their grand plans aren't just for the sake of efficiency itself.
Rarely. I mean, sometimes they can get lost in optimizing for optimization's sake. But usually if you dig deep enough, you find that their desire to fix the system comes from a deep-seated value judgment.
For example?
They want to fix the healthcare system because they believe it's fundamentally wrong that people are suffering because of inefficiency. They want to restructure the company because they believe it's unjust that talented people are being held back by bureaucracy.
So phi is what ensures the goal has personal meaning.
Yes. But because it's the inferior function, it's like a child in their psyche. It's very pure, very black and white, and very, very fragile. It's not equipped to handle heavy lifting, and that becomes a huge problem during a collapse.
Okay, so we have the layout. A high-powered machine driven by vision and logic, grounded by physical activity, and guided by a hidden, fragile moral compass. It sounds absolutely formidable.
It is.
So why does it break?
because of what the sources call systemic fragility. The great irony is that the very traits that make xNTJs so successful, the unrelenting standards, the obsession with efficiency, the need for logical control, are the exact conduits for their collapse. The strengths are the weaknesses.
Okay, this feels like the core of it. Let's get into the triggers. The source material lists 4 major stressors, which it calls the 4 horsemen of xNTJ stress. These are the specific environmental factors that cause the gears to grind to a halt.
Yes. If you want to destroy a high-functioning xNTJ, you don't need to be mean to them. You don't need to attack them personally. You just need to introduce these 4 elements into their environment for a prolonged period.
Horseman number 1 is prolonged inefficiency.
This one feels almost comical from the outside, but I promise you, to them, it is not. We're talking about being trapped in a system that values bureaucracy over results.
Red tape, pointless meetings.
Pointless meetings are like kryptonite. The text describes their reaction to disorganized people or mindless rule followers as visceral. It's almost a physical allergy. They feel it in their bodies.
It's like watching someone try to build a house with no blueprint and the wrong tools, and you're not allowed to intervene.
That's a perfect description, especially if they are in a position where they have responsibility for the outcome, but no authority to change the broken process. Their extroverted thinking, which craves impact and order, becomes constantly frustrated.
They're pushing a boulder that won't move.
And eventually they just give up. This leads to a state the sources call irritable apathy. They don't get sad, they get cynical, and they check out. They stop caring because caring is inefficient in a system that doesn't reward it.
Okay, so that's horseman 1. What's number 2?
Knee uncertainty.
Ugh.
This strikes right at the core of the architect, the INTJ, but it affects ENTJs too. Remember, they survive by predicting the future. They need a trajectory. They need to see the path ahead.
So what happens when they can't predict it? When the future's just fog?
Say they're working for a boss who changes their mind every single day. Or they're in a market that is so completely volatile that there is no discernible pattern. Their knee, their intuition, cannot form a vision. It's like a GPS that can't find a signal.
The future trajectory dissolves.
It collapses. The text calls this a collapse of purpose.
Yeah.
If they can't see where they are going, they can't use their 10 to reverse engineer the steps to get there. They are paralyzed. They're stuck.
That leads right into the third one, which feels like the heaviest hitter of the 4. T insecurity.
This is the core wound. This is what turns stress into a full-blown collapse. We discussed how they attach their entire identity to outcomes. Well, what happens when a major project fails? Or they get fired from a job they've poured their life into?
An ordinary person might feel sad or disappointed.
But an xNTJ doesn't just process this as that event was a failure. They internalize it completely. The logic becomes, the project failed. I was in charge of the project, therefore I am a failure.
It's a direct attack on the self. I am incompetent.
Exactly. And this is when their inferior phi, that fragile emotional core we talked about, it doesn't just get hurt, it explodes. The text says it turns their self-worth into a black hole. Because they don't have a strong sense of intrinsic worth just for existing, they feel like they have become trash. They have no utility, therefore they have no value.
That is brutal. It's so hard to imagine someone who appears so arrogant and confident having that kind of profound fragility right underneath the surface.
It's their deepest, most guarded secret.
And the 4th horseman.
Sensory overload. This is more of a straightforward mechanical issue. Their primary functions, N and T, are abstract and future-focused. If you force an xNTJ to handle high-detail logistics, micromanagement, or constant, loud, chaotic present-moment demands for weeks on end...
You're forcing them to live in their lower functions.
Right. You're forcing the visionary to do data entry. It triggers what the sources call dominant function fatigue. Their main tools get worn out. It drains their battery faster than anything else. Their planning brain literally shuts down to protect itself.
So let's say these triggers hit. The project failed, the bureaucracy is stifling, the future is unclear, and they're burned out. The engine stalls. Now we move into the internal experience, which the sources call the Ni-Fi loop.
Or, more dramatically, the loop of death.
Explain the mechanics here. What is actually looping? What does that mean?
Okay, so in a healthy state, an xNTJ perceives something with their intuition, Ni, and then they check it against the real world with their thinking, Te. I have a hunch the strategy will work. Okay, let's look at the market data to verify. Okay, the data says yes, let's act.
So there's a reality check.
There's a bridge to the external world. In the Ni-Fi loop, they bypass Te completely. They stop looking at the real world for data. The bridge is burned. They get trapped in a closed circuit between their internal fears, ni, and their internal feelings.
So it's a completely internal
A
spiral.
feedback loop from hell. Here's the step-by-step breakdown from the sources. Step 1, ni activation. The intuition perceives a negative possibility. It's no longer a helpful tool. It's a doomsday machine.
So a thought like, my career is over.
Or they are all laughing at me behind my back. Or this entire strategy is fundamentally doomed.
Usually Ted would step in and say, wait a second, sales were actually up 10%, let's calm down.
Exactly. But Teta is offline. So Nye does the opposite. It starts actively scanning for abstract patterns to prove the disaster is real. It becomes a paranoia engine. It interprets a generic email as a passive-aggressive attack. It sees a minor market dip as the beginning of the end of capitalism.
It's confirmation bias on steroids.
And then comes step 2,
Yeah.
FI justification. This is where that fragile inner child introverted feeling gets involved. The raw, unfiltered emotions kick in. I feel worthless, I feel ashamed, I feel like a fraud.
And the feeling validates the thought.
The feeling function looks at the paranoid thought from Nye and says, yes, that feels true. I feel bad, therefore the situation must be bad. My feeling of worthlessness is proof that I am, in fact, worthless.
This pure emotional reasoning. I feel it, therefore it is.
And that leads to step 3, to shut down. The refusal to take any action in the external world. The internal loop has convinced them that because the disaster is inevitable and they are fundamentally incompetent, any action is futile. Why bother?
So they just freeze.
They freeze. The text describes internal stagnation or a withdrawal into a kind of mental fetal position. But here's the trickiest part. They often rationalize it to themselves and others.
What do they say?
They'll tell you, I'm just thinking, or I'm strategizing a new approach, or I'm waiting for the right moment to act.
But they aren't planning. They're not actually strategizing.
No, they are ruminating. They are simulating failure over and over and over again in their head. They are completely disconnected from reality. The engine is running, but the car is in neutral, just burning fuel and going nowhere.
That's the internal state. It sounds horrifying, but eventually that pressure has to leak out, right? You can't hold that much negative energy in a closed loop forever.
It has to go somewhere.
This brings us to the external manifestation. The sources talk about shadow mode and the grip. These sound like horror movie titles.
To the xNTJ experiencing them, they feel like a horror movie. They feel like a possession. It's a complete loss of their sense of self.
Let's talk about shadow mode first. What is that?
When the primary personality, the competent, in-control commander or architect, is completely exhausted, the shadow personality emerges. And for xNTJs, their shadow is a dysfunctional, negative version of the INTP personality type.
So they become a dark INTP. What does that look like?
The most common thing they report is feeling very not me. They start using cognitive functions they usually ignore or even despise. First, shadow tie or introverted thinking.
How is that different from their usual Tay?
Tay is about external results. Does it work? Tay is about internal logical consistency. Is it perfectly defined? Is it 100% accurate? So they stop focusing on getting things done and start obsessing over accuracy and definitions. They overthink everything.
Analysis paralysis.
Severe analysis paralysis. They will spend a week debating the semantics of a plan rather than executing the plan. It's a total stall.
Okay, what else happens in shadow mode?
Then comes shadow Nick, extroverted intuition. Normally, their intuition is a focused laser beam, NIG. Shadow Ni is like a broken sprinkler, spraying out 1,000 negative possibilities at once. This manifests as intense paranoia about other people's intentions.
So they start connecting dots that aren't there.
Constantly. Why did she look at me like that in the meeting? Is there a conspiracy to oust me? He didn't reply to my email in 5 minutes. He must be plotting against me. It's exhausting for them and everyone around them.
And the text also mentions nostalgia loops. That seems very out of character.
It's the strangest part. That's shadow psi or introverted sensing. This is the saddest manifestation. The usually future-focused xNTJ starts obsessing over the past. They'll replay a mistake from 5 years ago on a loop, picking it apart. They get sentimental in a weird, sticky, unhealthy way. They completely stop looking forward.
So that's the shadow, this withdrawal into overthinking, paranoia, and obsessing about the past.
Yeah.
But then there's the C grip. This seems to be the more explosive, more visible side of the collapse.
Oh, it's much more visible. The C grip is what happens when that tertiary release valve, extroverted sensing, blows off its hinges. The inferior say, the most childish part of their psyche, takes over the driver's seat.
So the disciplined, often ascetic xNTJ becomes.
Impulsive, reckless, and hedonistic. It's a desperate attempt to feel something real and physical to drown out the internal noise.
The examples in the source material are pretty wild. The first one listed is compulsive consumption.
Binging. Pure and simple. Binging food, alcohol, Netflix, video games, online shopping. It's an attempt to drown out that screaming nigh voice. The intuition is yelling, "You are a failure!" So they blast their senses with noise and stimulation to shut it up. They are literally trying to turn off their brain.
There's one specific example in the notes that I have to ask about. The ridiculous spreadsheet.
Laughs.
Yeah.
Yes, the ridiculous spreadsheet. This is a classic C-grip behavior, but it's often masked as productive work. Imagine a CEO whose company is facing a massive lawsuit and a stock price collapse.
A huge, complex, abstract problem.
Exactly, a nighttake problem, but they're in a grip. So instead of dealing with the lawsuit, they spend 3 days in their office cataloging their entire vinyl collection in an Excel spreadsheet, color-coding it by genre, year of release, and label.
Why? It seems so completely counterproductive.
It's a desperate grab for control. They feel they cannot control the big, scary, abstract thing, the lawsuit, so they find a small, physical, tangible thing they can control. The vinyl collection. It feels like they're being productive and organized, which is their comfort zone, but it's actually a sophisticated distraction mechanism.
The text also lists physical overexertion.
This is more common in ENTJs, the more action-oriented of the two. They will go on a punishment run, a 100-kilometer bike ride with no training, a marathon. They are trying to induce such profound physical exhaustion that the mental noise is forced to stop.
And finally, reckless impulsivity.
This is the most damaging one. Quitting a high-powered job on a Tuesday morning with no plan, buying a sports car they can't afford, blowing up a long-term relationship over a minor disagreement. It's a flailing attempt to change the external circumstances to fix the internal pain. If I just change my environment, I'll feel better.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't work.
It never works. It just adds more problems to the pile.
So the machine is stalled, the shadow has come out, and they've acted recklessly. If this goes on for months, we hit the bottom of the well. This is section 5, high-functioning depression and learned helplessness.
This is where the situation becomes clinically dangerous. And high-functioning depression in xNTJs is incredibly difficult to spot from the outside because they are absolute masters of masking.
Because they value competence so highly, they would see being depressed as a form of incompetence they need to hide.
Precisely. To them, it's the ultimate failure. So they don't stay in bed, they show up to work, they attend the meetings, they hit their deadlines. But internally, they're operating in what the sources call zombie mode.
The lights are on, but nobody's home.
Exactly. The primary internal symptom is anhedonia, the total loss of the thrill. Usually a difficult, complex problem lights them up. It's what they live for. Now it just feels like a heavy, meaningless weight.
And cognitive fog. This must be terrifying for them.
This is often what finally makes them realize something is seriously wrong. They pride themselves on their mental clarity and sharpness. Suddenly they feel like they are wading through mud. They can't access words. They can't hold complex strategic structures in their head anymore. They genuinely feel like they are losing their IQ.
Which for them is like losing their entire identity.
It's everything.
Let's talk about learned helplessness. This is a core psychological concept, but how does it apply so specifically here?
Learned helplessness is what happens when an organism learns, through repeated failure, that its actions have no effect on the outcome. For the xNTJ, the sacred link between I act and a logical result happens is broken. They start to believe that nothing they do matters.
And they develop a very specific attribution model for their failure.
Yes, it's sometimes called the 3 Ps, or as the sources put it, the internal stable global model. It's how they explain their failure to themselves.
Let's break those down. First, the attribution is internal.
They believe, I failed because I am incompetent. They don't blame the market, the team, or bad luck. They blame their own essential nature. It's a character flaw.
Second is stable.
This will never change. They lose their visionary eye. They project their current state of failure infinitely into the future. They assume it's a permanent condition.
And the third one, global.
I am a failure in everything. This is the contagion effect. If they fail at work, they decide they are also a bad spouse, a bad parent, and a bad friend. The failure in one area contaminates their entire identity. There is no part of them left that is competent.
The sources are very stark about the dangers here. They explicitly mention suicide risk.
It is a significant risk for these types, and it's important to be direct about it because they equate worth with utility and competence. If they perceive themselves as permanently useless, that's the stable and internal attribution, they may conclude that the most logical, efficient solution is to delete the obsolete machinery. It's a tragic misapplication of their own ruthless logic to themselves.
There's also the risk of system damage.
Yes. If they don't turn that destructive impulse inward, they turn it outward. A leader in deep shadow mode can be vindictive and cruel. They become authoritarian, paranoid, and destructive. They might dismantle a perfectly good team or fire talented people just to feel a momentary sense of agency.
They burn the house down to prove they can still light a match.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, we have stared into the abyss. We know what the collapse looks like, inside and out. Now we have to climb out. Section 6. The recovery protocol. The sources are extremely specific about how to frame this. You mentioned it at the top, no hugs.
No hugs. This is the most critical insight for peers, spouses, or therapists trying to help. If you approach a collapsed xNTJ with soft, validating empathy, oh, you poor thing, it's okay to be sad, just feel your feelings, you will trigger their resistance. You'll be shut down immediately.
Why? Most people want comfort when they're down.
To the xNTJ in this state, emotional comfort feels inefficient and pitying. It validates their deepest fear that they are broken and weak. It feels humiliating. Instead, you have to frame the entire recovery process as strategic optimization or performance deconditioning.
You have to speak their language.
You
Not
can.
fixing a person, you're debugging a system.
You're running a diagnostic. Your operating system has a glitch. It's running inefficiently. We need to identify the corrupt code, rewrite it, and re-optimize for the new environmental parameters. That language engages their TED. It makes recovery a project to be managed, a problem to be solved.
Okay, so stage 1 of this protocol is breaking the loop. The source material strongly suggests cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, but specifically applied as cognitive restructuring.
CBT works exceptionally well for xNTJs because it is logic-based and results-oriented. It's not about wallowing in feelings. It's about fact-checking distorted thoughts. The text proposes a modified version of the ABC model, calling it the ABCZ model.
Walk us through that.
Okay. A is the activating event, the trigger. For example, I missed the deadline on a project. B is the belief that follows. The automatic thought, I am incompetent, I'm a failure. C is the consequence of that belief. I feel ashamed and I will shut down and avoid my work.
That's the standard CBT model. What are the Z?
Z is the optimization. It's an active, logical dispute of the belief. You challenge it with data, just like they would challenge a flawed business plan. Is it factually true that missing one deadline equals total incompetence? Let's look at the data. The data shows a 99% success rate on all prior projects. Therefore, the belief I'm incompetent is statistically false. What is the most efficient next step to mitigate the damage from the missed deadline?
It forces the brain to move from the emotional phi judgment, I am bad, to a tactical T question, what is the next logical action?
You're externalizing the failure. The machine had an error, not I am the error.
That makes so much sense. Okay, stage 2 is reestablishing contingency. The goal here is to prove to the brain that action still equals result. Because remember, they've learned helplessness.
Right. And you cannot start with a big goal like fix your career. That's far too overwhelming. You have to start with what the sources call micro wins.
The famous 2-minute rule.
If a task takes less than 2 minutes, you do it immediately. Don't think, just do. Clear the coffee cup off your desk. Wash the single dish in the sink. Send that one-sentence email you've been avoiding.
Why does something so small help with something so big?
Because it generates a tiny hit of dopamine. More importantly, it provides undeniable physical proof to the brain. I took an action and the environment changed. It starts to rebuild that broken link. It jumpstarts the T engine with a very small, manageable task.
The text also mentions a technique called momentum chaining.
This is a great hack for them. You link a completed micro task immediately to the next tiny task. You don't pause. You wash the cup, and while you are standing there, you open the laptop. You open the laptop and you immediately open a new document. You ride the momentum of the small win into the next step. You rebuild the feedback loop of success, brick by tiny brick.
Stage 3 is sensory calibration. This is about fixing that out-of-control C grip. We need to get them out of their head and into their body but in a healthy, controlled way, not a destructive one.
Right, and the sources make an interesting differentiation here between what ENTJs and INTJs typically need.
What's the difference?
ENTJs, because they're extroverted, often have lives full of people, demands, and performance. They usually need solitary decompression. They need to disconnect from the audience. So things like solitary long walks, meditation, or solo sports where there is no competition and no one is watching, they need to remember who they are when they're not performing.
And INTJs.
INTJs are already solitary, but their brain is constantly predicting and simulating, so they need unstructured downtime. They need a safe space where prediction is not required and there is no goal. This could be sitting in a quiet room and just listening to music, or engaging in a physical craft like woodworking, where the process matters more than the outcome. They need to turn off the radar.
There's a note here about biometrics that I love. It suggests gamifying the recovery, which seems perfectly suited to this personality type.
Yes, this is a brilliant tactic. If you just tell an xNTJ to rest more or get more sleep, they will see it as being lazy and unproductive. But if you give them a Whoop band or an Aura ring and tell them to optimize their heart rate variability and their sleep efficiency scores,
Now it's a project. It's a problem with metric.
it becomes a performance metric. They will attack rest with the same intensity they attack work.
You make sleep a KPI.
Exactly. My recovery score was 95% today. I win. It hacks their own need for competence to serve their health.
Finally, let's talk about the people around them. Section 7, a guide for peers and organizations. If I'm a manager or a partner or a friend of an xNTJ, how do I spot the collapse before it's too late?
It's tricky because of the masking we talked about. The key is, do not look for tears or sadness. Look for what the sources call numb mode.
Numb mode.
Are they suddenly taking a week to do a simple task that usually takes them an hour? Are they just staring at their screen, not producing anything? Are they neglecting basic hygiene or health, like forgetting to eat? And crucially, look for that shadow hostility. If your normally composed colleague suddenly becomes paranoid about conspiracies or starts lashing out at incompetence in a way that feels unhinged and disproportionate, that is a huge red flag.
In the intervention script, we established that "I'm worried about you" is the wrong opening line. What is the right one?
Focus on the system, not the person. Say something like, I've noticed the efficiency on this project has dropped about 15%. It seems like there might be some system-level read blocks. Let's look at the workflow together and see where we can optimize it.
You externalize the problem. You make it a shared puzzle.
You make it a puzzle to be solved together rather than an accusation of personal failure. You're inviting their TED to come out and play in a safe, low-stakes environment.
And then, the sources say to assign low-stakes Tay tasks.
Yes, this is brilliant. Give them a small, purely logical task with a clear, achievable finish line. Hey, can you help me organize this file structure logically? Or, can you review the logic in this argument for me and find any flaws?
It seems mundane.
But completing a logic task successfully, no matter how small, reminds their brain, oh, right, I can still do this. I am still logical. I am still competent. It's like using a defibrillator on their thinking function.
It's jump-starting the car battery.
Exactly. You just need a small spark of logic to get the alternator running again.
This has been a massive deep dive. We've gone from the mastermind to the broken machine and all the way back to strategic agency.
It is a journey, and I think if there is one thing that listeners should take away, especially if they identify with this profile themselves, it's this. True, sustainable leadership involves recognizing that you are a biological machine with limitations.
Right. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. Delegation, rest, and even emotional maintenance are not weaknesses. They're logistical requirements for high performance. If you don't change the oil and do regular maintenance, the Ferrari stops running. You cannot drive at 200 miles an hour indefinitely without a pit crew.
That is the paradox, isn't it? To be the most competent, you have to admit you have limits.
You have to optimize for longevity, not just for speed.
I want to leave all of you with a final provocation from the text. The goal of this recovery isn't just to get back to the way you were. It is to kill the unhealthy shadow and integrate the lesson that you learned in the darkness.
It's about building a more resilient system. It's about balance.
So here is the question for you to think about. If your productivity is your armor, what happens when it gets too heavy to wear? Are you driving the machine, or is the machine driving you?
That is the question.
Something to think about while you optimize your sleep scores tonight. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.